Hey, what's up? For whatever reason, the best shrimp tacos I've ever had in my life I had while in Florida, which doesn't make sense at all. If you know anything about the great state of Florida, it's that you're not there for the food, dude. So today I'm gonna show you how to recreate the best shrimp tacos I've ever had, and we're gonna make the entire thing from scratch, including a delicious, easy to make flour tortilla. To get started, I'm gonna grab a bag of frozen shrimps. In this case, it's a wild shrimp that is tail off, peeled and deveined, and the size is U4160, so these are pretty small. This is a 2-pound bag, and I need about a ½ pound per person for the tacos, but I'm also gonna be thawing another ½ pound or so to bring this up to about 600 grams total that I'm thawing, because I am gonna be snacking on these a bunch, and Lauren's around, and Lauren loves shrimp. After about 15 minutes under that cold water in the sink, I'm gonna drain off all that shrimp water and then bring them back over to my board and add 6 grams of salt. Salting shrimp like this, of course, brings the needed salinity and flavor, but it also firms up the flesh a little bit and brings a snappier texture. Once these are salted, now the shrimps are gonna go into the fridge to cure up for 30 minutes. In the meantime, I'm gonna grab my food processor and start in on the flour tortillas. Into the jar, I'm gonna measure 300 grams of all-purpose flour, 6 grams of salt, and 50 grams of lard. That goes in, the lid goes on, and now I'm gonna spin this up for about 15 seconds or so, or until that lard has become broken down into small pebbles throughout the flour. Next, I'm gonna grab 180 grams of cold water and stream that in slowly. It's gonna take about 10 seconds or so for all that to come together, and there we go. Cold lard flour paste. Next, to finish developing the gluten in this dough, I'm gonna flip it out onto my cutting board and give this dough a quick kneading to get it finished up. As you can see, a little flour needs to go down onto the board to keep this dough from sticking in the beginning, but after a few rolls, it's gonna loosen up and that tackiness becomes super easy to roll out. After about a minute of rolling this back and forth, this dough is stronger and ready to be divided. Real quick, if you don't have a food processor, a medium bowl will also work fine. You can definitely mix this by hand. The only thing I'd call out here is that to get the pork fat evenly spread out into this flour, you are gonna need your hands to fluff it up and get things properly combined. From there, I'm going to use a sturdy spoon to mix in the water and then start kneading just like we did before, but this time in the bowl. And I would need this for at least twice as long for this hand mix version here, because this stuff's going to be stickier right out of the bowl and it needs more kneads. You get it. Back to the first dough. To divide these, I'm gonna grab my digital scale real quick and then cut this dough down into 12 40-gram pieces. If you don't have a scale, I will link to this one down below, or if that's just not your style, I will put the volumetric measurements in the description as well. After these are divided into 12 little dough balls, I'm gonna roll them up tightly and transfer them over to a little baby sheet tray. After I've got all 12 of these rolled out, I'm gonna cover them with a tea towel and transfer them over to the top of my fridge, where I'm gonna let them rest for about 15 minutes. While that rests, we gotta bust out the garnishes for this taco. For the sauce, we're going to combine 100 grams of nice mayonnaise, 30 grams of sweet chili sauce. Yes, I am referring to that Asian style pot sticker stuff that is mostly sugar. It tastes delicious, and I'm not ashamed to keep it on hand as a pantry item. Behind that goes 15 grams of hot sauce and 10 grams of agave syrup, or honey also will work here great if that's all you got. Now, I'm going to stir everything up to combine, and that is literally it. This is a delicious sauce for tacos, and it turns out that if you add hot sauce to mayonnaise and put it on everything, you get good tasting food. Okay, the lid goes on, that goes into the fridge until it's taco time, and up next, we're gonna make a little slaw for these tacos. For that, I've got 2 veggies here. One is a little gem lettuce, or a green leaf if you can find it, and the other is green leaf cabbage. To get this stuff shredded down into slaw, I'm gonna use my mandolin. This is a Japanese one, and if you don't have a mandolin, I would say get one for sure, but be prepared. The learning curve is kinda steep, and you will certainly cut your hand, and those are not fun. But in the end, when you learn it, it is super worth it. Once I've got 250 grams of each veggie finally shredded, I'm gonna add in 25 grams of mayonnaise, 25 grams of sour cream, or plain yogurt if that's all you got, the zest of 1 small lime, I grated this up on my microplane, the juice of that small lime, and then 1 garlic, also grated on the microplane. Behind that, 10 grams of chopped cilantro and 5 grams of salt. For the sake of this video, I'm tossing this all together right now, but in reality, I would probably wait to toss this together until once the shrimp and the tortillas are already cooked, and have this kind of be like the last thing that you do. It's gonna have the best texture that way, it won't be super wet, and it'll just be better. Now, that's tossed up, looks good, into the fridge it goes, back to the tortillas. As you can see, these are nicely rested and quite shiny from, you know, lard. But before we roll these out, we need to preheat a cast iron pan over medium-low heat over at the stove. And also make sure you've got a vessel to hold the hot tortillas in. I've got this cool little tortilla dojo to do just that. Now to roll these out, I'm gonna flour my cutting board, and then using my fingertips, I'm gonna press this out into a 3-inch flat round, and then grab my rolling pin and start to roll these guys out thin. When the tortilla feels like it's gonna stick to the pin, I'm gonna hit it with some more flour, or flip it over, or rotate it 90 degrees to keep things separated. And I think most of you guys are gonna find this to be a really easy process. Once we've got something that is roughly 6 inches that is flat and looks kind of like a tortilla, we're gonna head over to the stove where the cast iron pan is preheated over medium-low heat, and we're gonna cook this dry. These tortillas cook super fast. It's only about 30 to 40 seconds per side, and once it's puffed up, you can see some really colorful speckles on the side that's hitting the pan. And now we're gonna flip this over and cook it for another 30 to 40 seconds on the second side, or until we see some nice speckles on side 2. Once we're there, into the tortilla warmer it goes, and then the lid goes on to steam this out. If you want to show your girl that you are a really cool, talented chef, try and make perfectly round tortillas. For that, all you gotta do is just trace a bowl onto a rolled out tortilla with a knife, and then tear off whatever is left. The cook time is the same, the flavor is exactly the same, but these are, you know, rounder. Once I've got all 12 of these tortillas cooked off, I don't need them all, so I'm gonna freeze half of them and then keep the other 6 out to party on for taco time. Now, let's check on the shrimp. It's been 30 minutes and they're plumped up and seasoned up with all that salt, and I'm gonna use a paper towel to dry up any excessive moisture that came out of them, and then I'm gonna set them aside. Now, to set up the breading station for these shrimp, I've got a small bowl, and into that goes 250 grams of buttermilk, 2 eggs, and 2 grams of salt. I'm gonna whisk all that up to combine until it's yellow, and then I'm gonna grab a third bowl. Into that goes 400 grams of panko breadcrumbs. These ones are pretty coarse in terms of crumb size, and I find that they work a little bit better for fried shrimp. I did try and grind this panko down finer to see how that would work, and it kind of had the texture of a cheap frozen shrimp from like Long John Silver's. Not totally great. Over at the shrimp bowl, I'm gonna add in 250 grams of all-purpose flour. King Arthur brand gluten-free flour has also worked here pretty well. I did test that for Lauren because she's gluten-free, and she was stoked.
It's awesome.
This flour is going to let the buttermilk egg stuff stick to the outside of the shrimp much better. Then, working in 2 batches, I'm going to move these shrimp over into that buttermilk mixture and stir them all up to coat, and then flip them over into my breadcrumbs. Pro tip, try and keep excessive egg milk out of this panko. That's going to create wetter crumbs and they're going to clump up, and that's not going to be good. Once all these shrimp are evenly coated but not totally caked with panko, I'm going to transfer them carefully over to a little baby sheet tray to hang out while we bread the rest of these shrimp. Real quick, I'm going to add a little bit more dry panko into this mixture because, as you can see, round 1 moistened it up a little bit, and we want to keep things nice and dry and light, and that's going to help stick to the shrimp overall a lot better. Once all these shrimp are tossed together, we're going to transfer those over to the sheet tray, and take a look. Now we've got a full tray of 1.5 pounds of perfectly coated shrimp ready to be fried and snacked upon. Over at the stove, I've got my landing zone set up, which is a half sheet tray and a wire rack so things don't get oily, and then over here is my hot tortilla pan, and into that I'm going to measure about a 1/2 cup or 120 grams of neutral oil. Once that oil's up to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 176 C, in goes the first round of shrimp. Just like with the breading, we are going to be doing this in 2 batches to prevent overcrowding and to make sure that all these shrimp get the attention they deserve. And if you're wondering, hey Bri, why isn't there more oil in this pan? I thought we were frying these things. Good question. To me, it lowers the barrier to entry for a lot of you home cooks out there who don't love deep frying at home, and it gives us pretty much the same product with 5 to 6 times less hot oil and a lot less risk. After about 2.5 minutes, we're going to flip these shrimps over to check on their progress, and these first few pieces are looking really good. They're nicely golden brown, so we're gonna go through and hand flip all the rest of these real quick and let them continue to fry for another 2 minutes or so. If the oil's looking kind of shallow in the pan, feel free to give it a little whirling around like this to get the sides of those shrimp nicely browned up and covered in oil. And after about 4 to 5 minutes of cooking, these look great, so we're gonna move them over to the sheet tray, and in goes batch 2. You may want to add some additional oil to the pan to keep the level high enough to actually fry half of a shrimp. I definitely needed to do that because I scooped out a little bit too much with my spoon. And after round 2, everything's on the sheet tray now, and take a look. These shrimp have turned out super good for what I would consider to be not really a lot of work at all. Now, to finally make this into a delicious taco, we got to grab one of those fresh, large, uncut, floppy tortillas that we just made, and into that goes a bunch of shrimps. Behind that is a liberal amount of spicy shrimp taco sauce. I really like to go heavy. It's quite zesty and me likey. Then, of course, comes our slaw. As you can see, it's not too wet. I did dress it right before I made these tacos. It's crunchy and light and it's perfect. And finally, we're gonna top this with tomatoes, but only if you have access to a product that you think tastes good. We really don't want any of that white mealy stuff on these tacos. And there we go. Look at this thing. You guys, a taco full of fried shrimps is like a mini vacation at home, and I really hope you treat yourself to something like this sometime soon. Let's eat this thing.